Welcome to the Home Support Training. This is a training for deaf parents. We will learn specific strategies to support communication in the home. This training was developed by the Illinois Service Resource Center, ISRC, a service and resource center of the Illinois State Board of Education. ISRC provides behavior support for students who are deaf, hard of hearing, or visually impaired. This video module series is a collaborative effort between ISRC, CHS, and DCFS. There are a total of 7 modules in this video series. Each module will focus on a specific topic. This module will focus on communication and why it's important. To begin, let's talk about abuse and neglect, child sexual abuse, and domestic violence. We will briefly describe each so you can be aware of the signs. Then we will dive into communication and how it can be used to support positive parenting within the home. What is physical abuse? Physical abuse is non-accidental behaviors that cause physical harm or injury to another person. Some examples are listed here, including spanking. Spanking becomes physical abuse if you're using things to hit your child, such as a fly swatter, spoon, hairbrush, electrical cords, or a belt. If you choose to spank, you must use an open hand, spank over clothing, below the belt, and above the legs, and not leave any marks on the body. Marks on the body are a form of physical abuse. If you spank your child and it leaves a welt or bruise, that is physical abuse. Other marks on the body include cuts or cigarette burns. Head trauma is also physical abuse. Shaking a child, throwing them against a wall, or hitting them with an object is physical abuse. Now we'll talk about neglect. Neglect means little to no supervision. There are different kinds of neglect. The first is leaving a child alone when they are too young to take care of themselves, such as babies, toddlers, or young children. They can't feed themselves or keep themselves safe. They are too young. Neglect also includes children who can't take care of themselves due to medical conditions, or children who have behavioral, mental health, emotional issues that make them unsafe to be alone, or children who have developmental or physical disabilities and they're not able to take care of themselves independently. Another kind of neglect is when the adult is there but is not able to provide care. For example, if the adult is drunk or high, they're not able to properly care for the child, so that is neglect. Or maybe the adult has a medical condition where they can't focus on the child. Or the adult has behavioral, mental health, or emotional problems and they can't focus on the child. Or maybe they have a developmental or physical disability where they can't safely care for the child. Those are all examples of neglect. Next, we'll talk about child sexual abuse. What is child sexual abuse? It is sexual activity with a child by an adult, adolescent, or older child. To prevent child sexual abuse, be aware of how much alone time your child has with adults, adolescents, and older children. Some signs that indicate child sexual abuse may be happening include redness, rashes, difficulty in sitting or walking, or acting out. Sometimes children use their behavior as a signal for help instead of their words. More prevention tips. You need to teach your child about appropriate kinds of touching. For example, the different kinds of hugs. Close, intimate hugs versus friendly hugs. Also, teach your child about personal space and boundaries. Now we're going to talk about domestic violence. Domestic violence is a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over another person. Anyone can be a victim of domestic violence, regardless of age, race, gender, sexual orientation, faith, or class. Victims of domestic abuse may also include a child or other relative, or any other household member. Let's look at the power and control wheel to see some examples of domestic violence. Domestic violence can look different across cultures based on the language and values of the people. The power and control wheel shows two main types of domestic violence: physical and sexual. Let's look at some examples shown on this wheel. Physical violence can include using forceful or threatening behaviors to make you afraid, financial abuse, and controlling your access to money, using race, gender, or hearing status privileges, or using children to force you to do something. Sexual violence can include intimidation and verbal or emotional abuse, possibly by criticizing you or your use of American Sign Language. It can also include isolation, not allowing you to be with others, moving away from friends and family, or always checking your email, text, or video phone conversations. There can also be behaviors that minimize your privacy by sharing private information about you, especially about your sexual behaviors, or maybe blame you for something because you are deaf. How does domestic violence affect children? Children who are exposed to it are more likely to develop eating and sleeping disorders, not do well in school, become clingy or cry a lot, or become verbally or physically aggressive towards others. They might also feel guilty because they think the domestic violence is their fault. Children who are exposed to domestic violence are also more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol or experience teen dating violence. If you need deaf-friendly support in situations of physical abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, or domestic violence, contact CHS at chscoa@annixter.org. We can help you figure out the next steps. You can also contact the Deaf Hotline. They provide 24/7 advocacy support for survivors of abuse. You can call them, email them, or chat online with an advocate at their website, www.thedeafhotline.org. Another source of information for support is Deaf Counseling Center. They have a list of many resources at deaf-emergency-service. Reach out, help and support is available. Now, how do we break this cycle of abuse, neglect, or domestic violence? It begins with expectations. Break down the old expectations and replace them with new expectations. Previously, your child may have been parentified or expected to take on the role of parent and complete adult responsibilities rather than being a child themselves. New expectations include exposing your child to age-appropriate content and boundaries. Think about sleeping arrangements. Who sleeps with who? Or sitting on laps. Is it age appropriate? What about doors? Open or closed? Think about what might be happening behind closed doors and decide if the door should be open or closed. Make sure you are aware of who is with your child and what they are doing. Is it age appropriate? Do not ask your CODA to interpret for you. That is an adult role. Let your child be a child. Make sure you are providing appropriate supervision to make sure your child is safe. When you are with your child, you should always have your eyes on. Be aware of your environment. Check in with your children every 5 minutes. Make sure you're able to see what's going on and think ahead. Predict what might happen next and prepare for it. If you see a potentially dangerous situation, such as water in the wading pool, respond accordingly. Maybe empty the wading pool, or make sure you're sitting near the wading pool with your eyes on and watching. Children can drown in only 1 inch of water. Food can be a choking hazard. Consider the age of your child and react to reduce this danger. Break old habits. How? Communicate. Think about communication. Why do we communicate? We usually communicate to share information, to tell something, to share experiences, or to teach. Communication is the key to healthy family relationships. It allows us to respond to each other's needs and wants. As a result, communication can build trust and security. Think about how you communicate. Now, think about how your child communicates. Remember, our body language and behaviors also are a form of communication. We're going to focus on some different ways to implement positive communication experiences. Why is communication important? Often, communication allows us to de-escalate frustrating situations. It helps us to slow down, think out loud, and reframe the expectations. When you communicate with your child and you provide choices, your child can feel a sense of control and learn about appropriate options. Offering choices allows your child to practice making good choices, which is a lifelong skill. When you are offering choices, you must consider, is it actually a choice? What if they say no? Then what? Pick your words and choices carefully. Frame it so they're still choosing to meet your expectation. For example, would you like to make your bed? That's not really a choice. There aren't two options. However, if you said, would you prefer to eat breakfast first and then make your bed, or make your bed first and then eat breakfast? That gives two options and gives them the power to decide when they'll make the bed, but they still have to make the bed, which is the expectation. Another example is, do you want to put your coat on? Again, that's not really a choice. There aren't two options. How could you change that request? Perhaps you could say, which coat would you like to wear? The red one or the blue one? That gives them a choice which coat to wear, but they still wear a coat, which is the expectation. When offering choices, it's important to make sure that the choices are equal. Look at these examples. Clean up your toys or go to timeout. Those are not equal options and the toys don't get cleaned up. Cooperate or get a spanking. Again, not equal options and cooperation doesn't happen. Do your homework now or get grounded for a week. Are those equal? Will the homework get done? Let's look at some equal choices. Milk or juice? Both are drinks, and both will help if thirsty. Yes, they are equal choices. How about going out with friends on Saturday or Sunday? It doesn't matter which day is picked. They still get to go out with their friends. Yet those are equal choices. And last, pink or purple pajamas? Putting on the pajamas is the expectation, and the choice is which color pajamas. That is an equal choice. Important tips for communication. Be aware of your facial expressions. Make sure your face and message match. Get their attention. Make sure your child is looking at or attending to you. Eye contact is important in deaf families. Explain the cultural aspect of eye contact to your child if necessary, so they understand why it is important to look at you. Prompt them before giving instructions. Let them know important information is coming up. Avoid distractions. Make sure the phone is down and the TV is paused while you communicate with your child. You could use visual tools to support your message, such as pictures or charts. Communicate normally. No need to exaggerate your signs or expressions. Take your time, don't rush, and keep it simple and age appropriate. Use if-then statements. If this happens, then that will happen next. Rephrase or say it again in a different way if needed. Communication happens in so many different ways. We use sign language, American Sign Language, body language, and facial expressions. Gesturing and pointing count as communication too. Behavior is another form of communication. Speaking and lip reading are ways to communicate, and using speech-to-text apps to access spoken language is an option. We also communicate by writing, using pictures, and various types of technology. Think about the way you communicate with your children and if it is effective for you and your family. In summary, we learned about neglect and abuse and how domestic violence impacts children. If you need resources for addressing abuse and neglect or domestic violence, seek out deaf-friendly resources. Know that your child may now need to learn new roles and expectations, and remember the importance of communication in breaking the cycle of abuse, neglect, and domestic violence.